Hey there friends, Andrea Walford here from Make Beautiful Cards. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create this Merry and Bright card featuring Stampin' Up's Tag Buffet stamp set. So I have here a scrap piece of Whisper White cardstock, and onto that cardstock I'm going to stamp the stocking image, a leaf image, and a berry image from the Tag Buffet stamp set, and I'm going to be stamping them in my Memento Tuxedo Black ink. So I've gone ahead, I've stamped my stocking, next I've got my leaves, and then finally I've got my berries. And even though technically I could stamp the berries and the leaves together, I decided to stamp them separately, and I'm going to cut them apart separately as well. So now that my images are stamped, my next step is going to be to color them. So I'm going to start by coloring the leaves, and for the leaves I'm going to be using my light and dark Granny Apple Green. So I'm going to start with my brush tip of my light Granny Apple Green, and I'm just going to color the entire surface of the leaf like so. So just a thin layer of my light Granny Apple Green across the surface of my leaf. Next I'm going to take my dark Granny Apple Green, and here, so the berries are going to go on this side, so I'm adding a little bit of shading at the bottom with my brush tip, and then I'm bringing the shading up a little bit through the center of the leaf, so along the vein. Then I'm going to take my light Granny Apple Green, and I just want to brush over the edges of the dark Granny Apple Green just to kind of blend them and smooth them out. Then finally I'm going to come in with a little bit of my dark Granny Apple Green again, just at the tip, like so. Now for my berries, I'm going to be using my light Poppy Parade and then light and dark Flirty Flamingo. So where you see the lines on the berries, I'm going to take the bullet tip of my light Poppy Parade, and I'm basically going to create almost like a half circle of the light Poppy Parade in that section. Then I'm going to take the brush tip of my dark Flirty Flamingo, and I'm just going to bring it just right over the border of the light Poppy Parade. And then finally I'm going to take my light Flirty Flamingo, and I'm going to color in the rest of the area as you see here. So for my stocking, I'm going to start by coloring the tip of my stocking and the heel as well as the top of the stocking in my light Flirty Flamingo. So I'm just going to place a single layer of my light Flirty Flamingo on each of these areas. Next I'm going to come in with my dark Flirty Flamingo. I'm going to use the brush tip, and I'm going to color in a flicking motion along the left side, in the bottom there, and up along the right side. For the heel of the stocking, I'm coloring kind of along the left side and bringing it up the sides as well. And then for the top portion of the stocking, I'm also bringing it quite a bit along the left side, up along the bottom, a thinner border along the left and along the right. So you can see I'm coloring quite a bit there. Now I'm going to take my light Poppy Parade, and I'm going to add a little bit of shadowing here. And I'm also going to add some shadowing kind of in a bit of an L shape here on the top portion of the stocking. So now I'm going to come back with my dark Flirty Flamingo, and I'm going to go over the light Poppy Parade and extend a little bit beyond the dark Flirty Flamingo edge that I had before. So I never want to end my strokes in the exact same area. So here I'm not going all the way to the edge of the stocking, I'm just going over the edge of the dark Poppy Parade and then extending a little bit beyond it. Now I'm going to come with my light Flirty Flamingo, and I'm brushing over the edges of the dark Flirty Flamingo. So I'm going to do that for all the different segments of my stocking. So you can see I'm not covering up the entire area. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to take my dark Flirty Flamingo and I'm just going to darken up along the bottom again here a little bit. Just in the very corner. I'm not going as high as I did before. I'm going to come back with my light again. And then I'm going to finish off by covering the entire surface area, like so. So now I'm going to leave it to dry because oftentimes it'll take a little bit of time for the alcohol markers to blend on the paper. So it's best just to let it sit, see how it looks, and then you can go back and touch it up if you need to. So now I'm going to color the body of the stocking with my light Pool Party Stampin' Blend. So as I did with the other segments, I'm starting by laying down just a solid amount of my light Pool Party. Now I'm going to come in with a little bit of my Bermuda Bay. Bermuda Bay, this is the light Bermuda Bay, and this is an extremely, in comparison to the Pool Party, it's quite a contrast, quite a bit darker than the Pool Party. So it's a little bit more challenging to blend. So I'm really pretty much going to do one main layer of Bermuda Bay. I may come back and deepen it in the corners a very little bit. But for now, as you can see, I'm just adding a bit of a border of the Bermuda Bay. Or not a border, I guess you could say I'm outlining the inside. Like so. Now I'm going to come in with my dark Pool Party, and you'll see right away when I go over the edge of the Bermuda Bay that it barely blends out at all. And that's because there is such a strong contrast between the dark Bermuda Bay and the light Bermuda Bay and the dark Pool Party. So basically what I'm going to do to blend it is I'm going to go over it multiple times. So I'm starting, you see I've already gone over it twice, so I'll start at one edge. I'm not going all the way to the outline. I'm just using the brush tip. I'm using a flicking motion and I'm going over the border, so just the very edge of the Bermuda Bay. And what that's going to do is it's going to start to soften it. So I'm going to let that work for the moment. I'm going to take my light Pool Party and I'm going to go over the edge of my dark Pool Party. And there's a fairly significant contrast between the light Pool Party and the dark Pool Party as well. So you may notice that it'll still look fairly choppy. So now I'm going to come back again with my dark Pool Party, and I'm once again going to blend out that area. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over the entire surface area up to the edge, including where I colored the dark Bermuda Bay, working in a flicking motion. So you can see I'm continuing to work in a flicking motion all around the inner perimeter or outline of my stocking. And you can see now it's softened quite significantly. And now I'm going to come in again with my light Pool Party and I'm going to go over the border of the dark Pool Party. Then I'm just going to fill in this area like so. So now you can see that over here it's blended quite nicely, but we've lost some of that really deep tone of the dark Bermuda Bay. So I'm going to come back in just a little bit with my dark Bermuda Bay. And because we have quite a lot of layers of alcohol marker, you'll notice the edges don't look quite as harsh as they did the first time we put our layer down. So now I'm going to come with my dark pool party. I'm not going over the whole thing, but I'm just blending out the edges. Normally when you're coloring with Stampin' blends and you're going from your light to your dark, you don't have to go over the shadows as much as you've seen me do with this stocking. The reason that we did it with this is simply because of the difference in contrast between the dark Bermuda Bay, or sorry, the light Bermuda Bay and the dark Pool Party ink. But now you can see after all those layers how beautifully it's blended. And if you take a look at the back, you can see we did use quite a lot of ink, and that's perfectly okay. That's how your back should look. So now that we've finished coloring our images, our next step is going to be to fussy cut them. So I'm not really leaving a border around the stocking. I mean, maybe there's a faint, slight white border, but barely. Like, you pretty much want to be cutting along the lines. So I'm using my paper snips for this. And just to make it a little bit easier to handle my paper, I'm just going to cut this down to a smaller size. I do have a video tutorial on my YouTube channel on how to fussy cut like a pro. And if you struggle with getting good results when you're fussy cutting, then I do recommend that you take a look at that video, because it'll give you some great tips for getting great results with fussy cutting, because there are a few tips and tricks that just make it a lot easier to get really professional results with your fussy cutting, so that people can't even really tell that it's been hand cut. So that's the stocking. And now I'm going to do the same for the leaves and the berries, and then once I finish doing that, I will be back. So I finished cutting my stocking, my berries, my holly. Now what I want to do is I want to stamp the Merry and Greeting, and that comes from the Peace and Joy stamp set. It's two separate stamps, but because we're going to be cutting them out, I'm basically going to mount them on the same block. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, my Jet Black Stays On ink. And the reason I'm using my Stays On ink versus my Memento Tuxedo Black ink is that I actually find that when you're doing solid images like this, the Memento Tuxedo Black, when it dries, it tends to look more like a very dark gray rather than a true black, whereas the Stays On ink actually dries as a true black. So now that I've stamped them, my next step is going to be to cut these out. So once again, I'm using my paper snips, and I'm going to cut these right along the line. And I'm cutting slightly a little bit onto the black, simply because I don't want any white showing around this. Also, for whatever reason, and I'm not sure if it's a function of the stamp or how I'm stamping it, but I find that the edges of the lines are not super crisp. So it just, to me, it just looks better if you just cut completely around it without leaving any kind of a border. So there you can see we've fussy cut our greetings. Let's now move on to our die cut pieces. So I have here a scrap piece of Blushing Bride cardstock. I have my Christmas Layers dies, and I'm going to be using this snowflake die from that die set. And then I have a piece of adhesive. This is from my adhesive sheets. So basically it's double-sided adhesive created in sheets. So you can see here I have my double-sided adhesive on the back of part of this cardstock piece, but I don't have enough to die cut a second piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some adhesive to this part of my cardstock, and I'll show you how I do this. Now this adhesive, the adhesive itself is in strips on a solid backing. So what I like to do to apply it without getting my fingers all over the adhesive is to just fold back an edge, and then I'm just butting it up against my previous piece of adhesive, peeling back the backing. So now the adhesive is on the cardstock and is protected by another backing. So what I now want to do is I'm going to place my die over top, and let's just double check to see. It looks like it'll be completely, or on a piece that is completely covered with the adhesive. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hold it in place with a little piece of my Scotch removable tape, and I'm going to die cut it. So as you can see, I finished die cutting my snowflakes. So now I want to die cut the word bright. And the word bright comes from these joy dies, which coordinate with the Peace and Joy stamp set. So I've already gone ahead on the back of this piece of basic black cardstock, and I've placed some of my double-sided adhesive. So now I'm going to take my word and I'm going to place it on top of my cardstock piece. I'm just trying to position it in a way that I maximize my cardstock. I'm going to hold it in place with a piece of my Scotch removable tape, and then I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. So I'm back from my die cutting machine, and you can see I have here the word bright. Now the dot you can see is die cut separately. So to keep it from getting lost, I've gone ahead and I've stuck the dot onto a piece of onto that same piece of removable tape that I held my die down with. So that's going to keep it from getting lost. So the final piece we need to prepare is our cardstock panel. This is a 3 7/8 by 5 1/8 inch piece of Whisper White cardstock, and I'm placing it inside my Subtles 3D embossing folder, and then I'm going to dry emboss it using my die cutting machine. So I finished embossing my panel, so we're now ready to start assembling our card. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to place my snowflake background and then my stocking. So I just want to position it where I want on my cardstock. So I'm just going to hold my cardstock panel onto my grid paper with a little bit of my repositionable adhesive. So that's going to keep it from shifting while I'm working. Now, because I'm going to have my stocking kind of positioned towards the left of the snowflakes, I'm going to offset my snowflakes a little bit from the center. So the first thing I need to do is I need to carefully peel off my adhesive backing. So that can be a little bit nitpicky. I find that you want to do it slowly, especially when you have a fine die cut piece like this snowflake piece. If you pull it off too fast, you can accidentally end up tearing your cardstock piece. So I'm just kind of working in sections. I'm holding it down with my paper piercing tool as I carefully peel back the backing. And then I still have a little bit here that I need to pull off, because you'll remember my adhesive, double-sided adhesive, I applied it in strips. So now, kind of stuck to my fingers there. Now I'm going to hold this with my tweezers so that I can better position it. And I'm going to position it so that it's centered between the top and bottom edges, and then my snowflake is going to be probably around 3/4 of an inch from the right hand edge of my cardstock panel, like so. Next comes my stocking. So to stick my stocking down, I'm just placing some of my Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue, and then I'm going to stick my stocking down so that it's just on a slight angle to the right. Well, so here would be straight, and I'm just angling it a little bit towards the right, and I want the tip of my stocking to be about a 1/2 inch from the left-hand edge of my cardstock, and again, I want this to be centered between the top and bottom edge of my cardstock piece. So now I'm going to take my little holly leaves, and I'm going to stick these so that they're partially on my stocking. And then I'm going to take the berries. I'm going to put a little bit of my liquid glue at the back of my berries. And I'm going to stick these down like so. Next comes our greeting. So once again, I have to very carefully peel back the adhesive backing from this greeting so that I'll be able to stick it down, or the backing off of the adhesive, so I'm exposing the adhesive. So now I'm going to carefully grab my greeting with my tweezers, and I want to place it onto my card so that it's a little bit below the center, and my bee is going to be overlapping my stocking. So there you can see how that looks. So now what we need to do is we need to stick this little dot from the eye, and this one is definitely a bit of a challenge to pick that backing off of. And there you can see I've now stuck that down. So my next step is to stick down my Mary and I want to stick these on a little bit of an angle just so that they look kind of whimsical. So I'm sticking the Mary, word Mary, so it angles downwards towards the right, and I'm going to stick this on with a little bit of my Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue. And then the word and, I'm going to put some glue on. And I'm going to stick that so that it angles kind of upwards. So now let's go ahead and we're going to stick this onto our cardstock panel. So this is a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of Blushing Bride cardstock. So I picked a cardstock color that coordinated with the cardstock, or well, I guess was the same cardstock that I used for die cutting the snowflakes. And that's to frame it. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to stick it onto my card front. And my card front is a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card created out of Whisper White thick cardstock. And to stick my panels onto one another, I'm using just some double-sided adhesive, so a tape runner. There you can see how that looks. So now we're going to add our ribbon. So this is a really beautiful ribbon called the Snowflake Splendor ribbon, and you can see it's kind of sheer and it has this beautiful iridescence. And we're going to create this ribbon treatment that you see here. So for this, what we're going to need is we're going to need some mini glue dots. You're going to need a paper piercing tool or a pair of tweezers. I'm actually going to use a pair of tweezers. And you want to keep your ribbon on the roll. So the first thing I want to do, you can see I have the end already cut on an angle, so I'm not going to worry about cutting that. And I'm going to about, I don't know, I guess about 3/4 of an inch in, I've placed a mini glue dot on the back of this ribbon. So I basically pressed the ribbon to the mini glue dot and stuck it there. So I'm placing my ribbon down. Sorry, I noticed something sticking here to my card. It's a little piece of the backing. Now I'm going to come with another piece of ribbon and see what I want to do is I want to take, or not another mini glue dot, and I want to take my ribbon and I kind of want to fold it downwards. So I'm placing my mini glue dot underneath where I want it to fold. And I'm going to take another mini glue dot and I'm going to place it where it's going to fold back like so. Now the nice thing is, even though this ribbon is sheer, the glue dots don't show through it. So now I'm going to place another glue dot at the back. Oops. So I've got another glue dot at the back. I'm going to bring the ribbon up. See, and this is a fairly firm ribbon, so I find when you press down, it's almost like you're folding the ribbon. So as you saw, I came back with my paper piercing tool and I just kind of fluffed it up a little bit. So I'm going to take now another glue dot. So I think I'm going to do this one in another direction. So I'm doing the ribbon treatment a little bit differently than I did for this card. And you can really do it however you want. So let's go ahead and we're going to put this under here. Got another mini glue dot, bringing it down. Really pressing down to make sure that ribbon sticks in the glue dot. Gonna grab another glue dot, place it See, essentially what I'm doing is I'm pretty much creating pleats with my ribbon. And then once you've placed your ribbon, and you like where it is, you then just trim the end on an angle. Now, how tight your little loops end up being are going to depend on where you place your glue dots. So I think what I'm going to do, because these ones are quite a bit puffier than the earlier ones, I'm going to place another glue dot inside the loop just to hold it down a little bit so it doesn't puff out quite so much. There, that looks a bit better. So there you can see how that looks. So the next thing we're going to do, or I guess the last thing that we're going to do, is we are going to add some rhinestones. So I'm just using some basic rhinestone jewels. I'm going to take a medium jewel and I'm going to place one over here. I'm going to take a small one and I'm going to place it down a little bit, maybe like that. I'm not pushing them down just in case I want to change the position. So I'm going to put this one here almost like a period. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these ones So there you have it, friends. This is what our card looks like, and it's now finished. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial, and I look forward to creating with you again soon. See ya!